Hello and welcome to Torah Thoughts. This week's Torah portion is Vayigash, which literally means "and he approached." What's going on here? This parsha is the Torah is bringing to a culmination of this very dramatic and emotional story of how Yosef was sold into slavery by his brothers. He spent 22 years in Egypt, during which time he went from being a slave to being a prisoner to being the second in command in all of Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself. And at this point there's a famine, as Yosef predicted. There's a famine going on in in the world. And Egypt is the only country where there were preparations made. They knew the famine was coming, and now they're selling food to everyone who comes, everyone in the region is coming to Egypt to buy food, and Yosef is in charge of all of it. Yosef's brothers show up, and Yosef arranges some sort of a showdown between them, where he first has them taken into custody. He interrogates them, accuses them of spying, and they tell him, "No, we're not spying, we're looking for our brother. That's why we were searching through all of Egypt. We have a brother that's missing. And we have another brother, Binyamin. He's back home, and he's with our father." Yosef says, "I don't believe you. And if you want to prove to me that what you're saying is true, go bring me that younger brother." So the brothers go home, and Yosef keeps Shimon, one of his brothers, as a hostage. So 9 of them go home, and they tell Yaakov, "Okay, we got to go back with Binyamin so that we can get food." And Yaakov says, "No way. No way." Yaakov has his favorite wife, Rachel, who died giving birth to Binyamin. He lost her, and she had 2 children. So Yosef, who Yaakov thinks is dead, so Yosef is gone, and that leaves Binyamin as the only remnant that he has left of Rachel, and there's no way he's going to let anything happen to Binyamin. Binyamin is not going. So Yehuda steps up, and Yehuda convinces Yaakov. He says to him, "Look, we have to, otherwise we're going to starve." And he says to him, he swears to him, "I will bring Binyamin back safe and sound, even if I have to give my life." So Yaakov gives in, and he sends Binyamin down. The brothers show up. Yosef, again, they don't recognize him. He has the Egyptian name, Tzofnat Paneach. But Yosef says, "Okay, now I believe you." They have dinner together. Everything is fine. Everything is beautiful. And what happens is Yosef gives them food. But as they leave, Yosef frames Binyamin. Makes it look. He plants his goblet, his cup, into Binyamin's luggage. And as they leave, they get stopped. And they search the luggage. They find it, of course, in Binyamin's luggage. And he says, "No, Binyamin stole my magic goblet. I'm going to arrest him. He's going to stay a slave in Egypt. The rest of you can go home." And all of the brothers are like, "No, this can't be possible. Binyamin's not a thief. This must be a misunderstanding." and Yosef says, No. We caught him red-handed. He's staying. He's a slave now." And this is when Yehuda steps up and says, "Look, I'll take his place. I'll make a much better slave than him. I'm bigger. I'm stronger. I'm more experienced in life and in doing whatever kind of work you need." And Yosef says, "No way. You're innocent. He's guilty. Go home." And that's where this week's parsha opens up. Vayigash elav Yehuda, and Yehuda approached him. So here's Yehuda approaching Yosef, and he begs him. He says to him, "Please, my lord, let me speak to you heart to heart." And he recaps the whole story. He says, "Look, you asked us whether we have family. And we told you we have a father, a brother. We told you, yes, we have an old father. We have a brother. We have another brother who's dead." And this is where Yehuda changed his story. Originally, when they met, the brothers said to Yosef, "We're searching through Egypt because we're looking for our missing brother." Here Yehuda says, he's dead. Now, remember what Yosef must be going through. Yosef spent 22 years in Egypt. He was ripped from his life when he was 17. Ripped from his life. He becomes a slave. For a 17-year-old to not know what's going on, suddenly he's a slave. Nobody's coming for him. Nobody's asking, "Where am I?" Now think about all these years. He's a slave, then he's a prisoner. Nothing. Nobody cares. Yosef had no idea what was going on back home. Now, for the first time, Yosef hears this story that they're saying he's dead. And Yehuda continues. And he continues about how we went home to our father, and we told him that we got to bring Binyamin, and our father said, no way. And it says, and this is a very pivotal moment. Vayomer avdacha avi, and your servant, my father, says to us, Atem yadatem ki shnayim yalda li ishti. You know that my wife, meaning Rachel, gave me 2 children. Vayetza echad meiti, and one of them went out from before me. V'omar, and you say, ach tarof toraf, you say that he was eaten by a beast. And I haven't seen him till now. This is Yaakov talking to Yehuda. And it almost seems like Yaakov says, and you say he was killed by an animal. As if he doesn't believe him. But more importantly, Yosef finds out for the first time, all this time, my father Yaakov thought I was dead. Remember, Yosef must have been very traumatized for a kid to grow up wondering what happened. Nobody came for me. Nobody came asking. What, that's it? They sold me as a slave? It wasn't a joke? And my father didn't come looking for me? And when he has his 2 children, Ephraim and Manasseh, he names them with the names give some sort of meaning to how he can now forget his past life. He can forget all the horrible things he'd been through. Yosef kind of like had to put his entire life behind him, and here it's staring him in the face. And he finds out all this time, my father's been mourning for me because he thought I was dead. You lied to my father. And the Midrash explains that there's more to it, to this conversation that went on. Yosef says to them, according to the Midrash, he's testing them on the one hand, but on the other hand, it almost seems like he wants closure. He wants to know what's going on here. And he says to his brothers, I gotta ask you something. His brothers, by the way, they didn't just beg for Binyamin's life, they threatened war. They said, the 10 of us are going to destroy all of Egypt. And Yosef knew they meant it, because they destroyed Shechem, just 2 of them destroyed Shechem. Right? Here they are threatening to destroy Egypt. And Yosef says to them, you're willing to go to war with Egypt's a mighty country. You're willing to go to war? Risk your lives? Destroy an entire country? For your brother Binyamin? Let me ask you something. And this is a very difficult question. You're going to do all that for Binyamin? And your brother Yosef? You wouldn't step up. You sold him as a slave? Why did you put your life on the line then? Now you can imagine the emotion behind a question like that. And the brothers say, look, enough talk. Release Binyamin or we destroy Egypt. And Yosef says, you're willing to destroy all of Egypt. The whole world, it's not just Egypt. The whole world is buying food from Egypt now. You destroy Egypt, there's no food left for the world. You're willing to kill everyone in the region for Binyamin. And they said, yes, we are. You're going to release Binyamin. And at that point, it says, V'lo yachol Yosef liyitapek. And Yosef couldn't hold himself in anymore. And Yosef cleared the room. He told everyone, clear the room, out! Everyone had to leave. His servants, everybody, the translators. And Yosef is left in the room with his brothers. And he says to them, I know the truth. You want to know how I know the truth? Because Yosef is in the room. And the brothers were in shock. And he announces, Yosef, come out! And they start looking, Yosef, what? It was a shock to them. And he says, Yosef, come out! And as they're looking around the room, where's Yosef going to come out from? He says, you can stop looking, it's me. I'm Yosef. Now they're in even greater shock. Can you imagine what they must be thinking? And he calms them down. And he's crying. And he's trying to calm them down. No, really, it's me. So I submit to you, what's going on here then he says to them, don't feel bad. Okay? It says, V'ata al ta'atzvu, and don't be distressed. V'al yichar be'enechem, and don't be angry at yourselves, that you sold me as a slave here. Because God sent me here to be a provider for food. And then later on he says again, he says, Lo atem shalachtem oti hena. You didn't send me here. Ki Elokim. It was God. Vayisimeni la'av leParo, and He put me as a father figure to Paro. So what it seems to me here is what's going on. Yosef is angry at them, and he's got a right to be angry. According to the Midrash explains, it makes sense that Yosef said, "You look at what you're about to go through for Binyamin. You couldn't do even a teeny bit of that for me." But when he realizes the lengths that they're willing to go to for Binyamin, it dawns upon him, and I'm basing this based on the way he speaks immediately afterwards. This wasn't them. They didn't do this. This was God's. God made them do that to bring me here. And this is why he says, don't be angry at yourselves. You didn't send me here. God sent me here. God caused you to do this so that I should be in this position right now to warn Paro so that Egypt can have all this food so that we can provide food for the world and for you. And he invites them, come down to Egypt. Let's all live here. I'm powerful. I'm the second in command. You're going to have the best of everything here. Sure enough, Yaakov and his entire family come down to Egypt. How amazing is it? Yosef, after everything he'd been through, realizes God had a plan. Now, is that amazing? Many of us realize that. What's amazing is that Yosef only scraped the tip of the iceberg. Not only did God have a plan in making them sell him to become a slave, but look at how far. And from here we learn that every little thing that happens, there's no such thing as coincidence. When a leaf falls from a tree, the way that it falls and the way that it lands is all set up by God. When a blade of grass grows in a certain way, or a pebble rolls in a certain way, all of that has an effect on how the world is, on huge outcomes in the world. Let's go back to when Yaakov was born. Yaakov had a twin brother, Esav, and Yaakov was born seconds behind Esav. What did that cause? That caused Esav to have resentment over the fact that Yaakov got the blessings from Yitzchak. Esav was the firstborn. He felt entitled to the right of the firstborn. That's what gave him the resentment. Because of that resentment, he wanted to kill Yaakov. Yaakov had to flee to Haran to find his wife. He couldn't go there peacefully. And because of that, Esav's brother hunts down Yaakov, robs him of every penny that he has. Yaakov shows up, a fugitive, penniless, in Lavan's house, and he's forced into this position where he has to negotiate with a man like Lavan for his wife. And Lavan tricks him. Lavan betrays him. Because he knows he's got him by the you-know-what. Okay? All of this because Esav was born a fraction of a second before Yaakov. And then what happens? Because Lavan tricks Yaakov, Yaakov ends up with more than one wife. He ends up with 4 wives, actually. And the wife he wanted, Rachel, the children that he has from her are the youngest ones. But he loves them. And he loves Yosef. Yosef is the firstborn from Rachel. But because of all of that, Yosef's brothers have resentment. They're older than him. They feel that they have more rights than him. They're more entitled than him. And that's how they end up sending him into slavery. All of these details come into play to make they mesh together into one complete story, into one complete purpose. And what Yosef perhaps didn't realize at the time, I'm not sure if his father told him the prophecy that God told Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, there's a reason why you're coming down to Egypt. All of this was done so that Yosef should be the second in command, so that he should be able to feed them. But why the famine to begin with? So that the nation of Israel should wind up in Egypt, so that God can take them out with all the miracles. Passover, Pesach can happen. And the Jews wind up receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai. Every little thing that happens in life, one thing connects to another. You can go back, dig deeper, you go all the way back to the beginning of creation. One little thing, everything leads to another. Until ultimately, the ultimate purpose is we're going to see when, in the time of Mashiach, when the world is complete. And we can learn a lesson from that. It's like that with everything in life. There's a midrash that says that God he decides the course of a war. He affects the cause of a war so that a man and a woman should end up coming together to get married. And you can imagine, if God makes a certain pebble roll a certain way, And that causes a car to shift a little bit when it's driving so that it should drive a second slower so that another car can pull out before it so that he misses a red light. And now he's stuck at the red light, and because of that, he doesn't get a parking spot where he needs to get to. And because of that, he ends up waiting in line behind someone, and that causes him to get to know someone who introduces him so that he ends up finding his wife. And a million stories like that can happen so that this couple ends up marrying and that couple ends up marrying so that the two couples should end up having children, and circumstances lead to them getting married so that they should have a child that performs something great in history. One tiny detail, billions and trillions of tiny details, all of that is a fabric woven together by God. So things that happen to us, we wonder how, we wonder why. I'll tell you another story. I'd like to share a story that many people already know. A lot of this story is floating around the internet in different components. There was, imagine this. Imagine a football stadium where tens of thousands of people gather for an event. It wasn't a football game. There's an event. There's a party going on, and so there's seats being sold on the field as well, filled to capacity. We're talking about 93,000 people all in one place, and there's music blasting, and people dancing, and having a good time. It's a party. When this party goes on for 5 hours on New Year's Day. Now, how many people would you imagine at this party were drunk? It's a football stadium. Music blasting and people dancing at a football stadium. How many of them are drunk? How many people among this 93,000 people, how many fights do you think happened? I'm not talking about a massive brawl. A small fight. A rowdiness, a report of disorderly conduct. I mean, in how many cases do you think perhaps stadium security had to intervene in a little bit of shoving here and there? What if I told you zero? Not a single drunk person or disorderly person in the entire stadium. This particular week was the culmination of a program known as Daf Yomi. I'm sure many people know this. And the celebration of this culmination was called the Siyum Hashas of Daf Yomi. What is Daf Yomi? So, the Talmud, the Gemara, is the basis of studying of Torah. That is the main tool where you learn what the Torah meant, what the Torah said, where you read what certain sages from many, many years ago, what they said about how you compare this verse in the Torah to another verse in the Torah, and how you extrapolate from that what the third verse meant. The entire Torah. Remember, I said this a few times. All knowledge in the universe is in this 5 books of Moses. How can that be? Well, you got to be able to decipher it. And the Talmud is where you learn how to decipher it. The whole basis, you go to a yeshiva, that's what's being studied. It's 36 volumes, 2,700 pages. And someone came up with an idea 96 years ago. What if all of us, if you go back to the very first video that I put in Torah Thoughts, and I said, I'm not an expert, but that's the whole point. The Torah shouldn't be only for the experts. The Torah is for everybody, even for a lay person. So it doesn't matter how little you know or how much you know. There should be something in Torah for you. Well, 96 years ago, someone actually said that. And he says, what if we can kind of devise a system where everybody studies Talmud? Everybody studies Gemara. It's called Daf Yomi, which means a daily sheet. What's a sheet? Meaning a sheet of Gemara. If you open a Gemara, each sheet is 2 sides, it's 2 pages, right? So when you look at the page numbers in the Gemara, it goes according to sheet. So if I would say to you, something is in page 34A, that means it's sheet 34, side page A. 2,700 pages, actually 2,700 sheets. He says, what if every day we're going to have a sheet designated? We'll start with the very first one. And every day we study the first one. Tomorrow we'll study the next one, and the next one, and so on. And everybody does the same page every day, each day. So that way, if I'm part of this program, and I travel somewhere, I can go into a synagogue somewhere, and join a class where they're part of the same program, and I'd be up to the same page that they're up to. And he started this program, which in the course of 96 years, it It is now expanded throughout the world. You can find, it's called Daf Yomi, which means a daily sheet. You can find it on the internet. You can find, if you type in Daf Yomi, there are websites where you'll see today's page, and you can actually click and see a recording or hear a recording of a course on today's page. You go to a synagogue, they study this thing. 2,700 sheets, we'll call them pages. 2,700 two-sided pages, one each day. Takes roughly 7.5 years to complete. So every 7.5 years, you complete this cycle. It's a huge celebration where Jews throughout the world together completed the entire cycle of the study of Talmud. It's happened 13 times in 96 years. So on New Year's Day, they had this celebration of the completion of Daf Yomi. And this was a celebration that occurred throughout the world. And if I'm not mistaken, the biggest gathering was at MetLife Stadium. And I had the privilege to volunteer as part of the staff at this event. It was an amazing, unbelievable thing to stand in a stadium and look up and look around. And this is Torah. You look and you see God's blueprint of the world being studied by so many people. And this is what our enemies have been trying to wipe out for thousands of years. And you see an entire stadium full of people dancing and singing with one mind and one heart. And the state police were there. And stadium security was there. And the things that they said about watching all of this was absolute what you would call a Kiddush Hashem, a sanctification of God's name. Because people who study God's book, specifically these people, the way they behaved is absolutely amazing. It's incredible. Not a single rowdy person. And when people entered the stadium, they looked at me. They didn't know I was Jewish. I was all bundled up and I was wearing a ski cap. And the thank yous that we got. Thank you for being here. Remember, last week, Jewish people went through a terrible, terrible tragedy. We saw a man run into a rabbi's house on Hanukkah as they were celebrating. It was a Hanukkah lighting ceremony. It was Saturday night, this past Saturday night. And he stabbed with a machete. He sliced and stabbed at 15 people. 15 people were injured, 5 of them seriously. One of them is in the hospital still. And it's doubtful whether he's going to make it. And aside from that, for the past few weeks, we've experienced such terrible anti-Semitism, attacks against Jews all over America and the world, actually. And the security was so tight at the stadium. And people who came to the stadium knew that they had to worry. What if somebody decides to do something against us? And every one of them, I saw them passing by the state troopers and passing by the stadium security and passing by all other levels of security with a thank you. Thank you for being here. Happy New Year. Even though, in Jewish tradition, we don't celebrate the secular New Year. But they knew that they were Happy New Year. Thank you for being here. The state troopers were so amazed that there was another story that happened. It happened just today. Today, meaning Thursday, January 2nd. There was a state trooper pulled somebody over on the Garden State Parkway. He approaches his car and he sees the guy wearing his yarmulke. And this state trooper New Jersey state trooper, he was on duty at the stadium. And he says to him, he sees the guy's yarmulke, and he says to him, "Did you do your page today?" The guy says, "No." He says, "I'll let you off with a warning if you promise to do your page." He says, "Okay." And it turns out, why did he do it? Because it was cool, because it was cute. The amazing Kiddush Hashem that happened. Because they saw how people behaved at this event. I want to say one quick thing. The man who helped organize the event, he deals with sports teams all over the world, and he said in an interview, he says, "I have no idea why did I end up doing sports. I'm not interested in sports. And I realized when the time came that I helped organize this event at MetLife, I realized that's why God put me into this field of work." And as they signed the contract to do this, the builder of MetLife Stadium said the same thing. "Why did I build a stadium? I never knew. I didn't feel fulfillment. until I realized the reason was for this moment here. Mika Amche Yisrael. That's my Torah thought. What's yours? Feel free to post it in a comment or your own video. Thank you for watching. Shabbat Shalom.